As I've stated before, the crisis we face is not just one of the virus, but what comes around it. And due to the economic shutdown, the food industry and supply chains are being disrupted. And now we are seeing more food riots. First, we saw them in Sicily, but not because the food wasn't there, because the ferries that brought the food to Sicily stopped running. The companies went out of business, so the food stopped coming. People ran out of money because they lost their jobs, and then people had to steal the food. Well, now we're seeing virus triggers unrest across Africa. Riots break out in Johannesburg over food shortages, and Lesotho's under fire PM deploys army to restore order as continent's death toll reaches 1,000. I gotta be fair. I gotta point this out. Look, I mean, no disrespect to these countries, but when I first saw the story about food rioting in Johannesburg, I wondered if it had anything to do with the coronavirus. They've long been facing serious conundrums and strife over farmland, as well as other countries as well. We're hearing that the army's being deployed in Lesotho, and Nigeria's chief of staff has died. So look, is the U.S. going to face food riots? I'm going to go ahead and say, at least for now, we are, I would assume, kind of far away. In fact, new data is coming out that suggests the mortality rate for COVID might be a lot less than they actually projected. They may have got things wrong, or at least we just didn't know, because now they're saying it could be like 0.12 or 0.2, which is comparable to the flu. It doesn't change the fact that there are serious complications and that people are dying, but it's certainly not as bad as they thought it was. But over in South Africa, the food riots have begun. Let's read the story from the Daily Mail. They say, unrest has spread across Africa with riots over food shortages and an army being deployed to restore order as the coronavirus crisis rocks the continent. Protests have erupted in Cape Town. The military have been mobilized in Lesotho, and the chief of staff to the Nigerian government died of the lethal bug. Africa now has more than 1,000 deaths from COVID-19, the Africa CDC and Prevention said Saturday. A total of 52 of Africa's 54 countries have reported cases of the deadly virus, with the overall number of cases more than 19,800. Now, interestingly, there's a lot less people dying and getting infected in the entire continent of Africa, which says to me they're probably not testing. So we don't know how many people are actually dying or what's really going on, but they are locking things down, and it is resulting in food shortages. We can see the army being deployed in Lesotho. So if you're not familiar, Lesotho is an enclave country completely surrounded by South Africa. But in this area, well, things are getting bad. Check it out. They say in Cape Town, people have broken into tuck shops and attacked each other and police because they are hungry, one resident claimed. Joni Fredericks, a community leader in Mitchell's Plain Township in Cape Town, said in a viral clip, "Mr. President, we are in the middle of a food crisis. It's war out here." The desperate plea was made in a video posted on social media to President Cyril Ramaphosa, who imposed a 5-week lockdown to try and curb the spread of the coronavirus. 4 weeks into a 35-day shutdown, poor communities are facing food shortages as incomes for mostly informal workers have dried up. Imposed from March 27th, the lockdown has placed already cash-strapped citizens under further strain. The number of people lining up for food at the self-funded scheme run by Fredericks and other volunteers are growing by the day. When we started out feeding people, we started out with the very vulnerable, the children, the disabled, the pensioners. But we are way past that, Mr. President. We are past the stage of sending people away, an emotional Fredericks pleaded. We are seeing people get turned away, or almost. We are seeing lines stretching miles of cars and people needing food in the United States. There are a lot of differences between South Africa and the United States, so let me just make that clear. I really don't think we're that close. Well, it's probably not my place to say whether we're on the verge of food riots or not, because we've already seen chaos erupt at one food bank when people weren't pre-registered, so they couldn't get food. With 22 million people now unemployed or filing claims, people are going to go without food. The food banks are starting to be strained. The food isn't coming. They're running out. And the small business loans that are dried up, and the Democrats didn't want to increase the number. So maybe we're closer than we realize. With that being said, I'll do something I don't normally do, but actually I'm really excited about this. This is a promo spot for supereasyseeds.com. It absolutely supports my channel when you go and check them out and buy. But this is actually a really cool thing. There's very few things I actually like promoting. But this is something called a seed sheet. Supereasyseeds.com, link in description below. You just get these little sheets and you water them, and then the vegetables grow. It's kind of cool. So they do brag about being a Shark Tank winner. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is, while I have promoted emergency food in the past, I am not advocating or doing this promo spot because I think you're going to need emergency parsley, cilantro, or basil if food riots start. But I think it's pretty cool. They actually have like a salad version, and they have herbs. And the way it works is basically you get these sheets, you just put them in these little, it's like a cloth pot of some sort. You water it, and they grow. I happen to think it's pretty cool. If it's not for you, then just ignore this. But again, it's in the description below. And it's mostly about like spices and I guess like salad vegetables. I got some. I'm excited for it. And I will just end by saying I'm grateful to have sponsors in these trying times. A lot of media companies are getting hurt really, really bad by this. So I hope you understand why I don't often do sponsor spots and why I'm doing them now. But I am legit excited for Super Easy Seeds. I actually have some. So that being said, let's jump back over to the story about what's going on. We can see these photos. Police are frisking people and searching people. We can see so I don't know if this photo is pictured. A South African National Defense Force soldier patrols the streets in Hillbrow, Johannesburg. So I know I just did that promo for the growing vegetables in your house stuff. I do think it's cool. But I want to just make sure I really drive the point home. I don't think the U.S. is going to be anywhere near where South Africa is for quite some time. So I want to just say that. When I first saw the story, I'm sure most of you agreed when you were like, wait a minute, South Africa? No, they're probably dealing with food shortages because of other problems with their country. We've seen this happen in many places where the government wants to seize farms for some kind of ideological reparation. In socialist countries, it's because the landlords aren't, real workers and the people should own the farms. The problem is the people who own the farms, the farmers, know how to farm and the workers, well, they don't. I mean, they know how to farm to a certain extent, but there's no oversight. So in many of these socialist countries, they're like, we're going to seize the land from the landlords and give it to the people. And then the people can't farm properly, and then everything falls apart, and then people starve. In South Africa and other countries, these land changes are due to racial tensions. So it's not so much about socialism, but about like whether a certain race deserves it or doesn't. This results in the same thing. People who can't farm can't just be given a farm. It doesn't work that way. It's similar to what they say in the U.S., like, why don't we just put homeless people in houses? Because they can't maintain them. With that in mind, I know it's probably not the core reason why the food shortages are happening. It's a 5-week lockdown and people have no money anymore. But it definitely plays a role. And that's why, even though we've been under a lockdown, I believe we've been under lockdown longer, we aren't facing the same kind of shortages. Now, we are facing shortages for sure, like major food banks, milk is being dumped. So perhaps it's naive of me, perhaps it's my American privilege that I think we're not going to be, in a similar position. Just knowing the history of South Africa, I'm more inclined to believe they've been worse off than us for a while. But perhaps that's hubris, and perhaps it's wrong of me to tell you whether or not you should or shouldn't be preparing for this stuff. I mean, I've said before, you definitely should have emergency food because who knows what's going to happen. You think it can't happen here because of the problems with South Africa. I mean, maybe you'll be surprised because, it can. We've got people lining up at food banks. The economy is shut down. With the Democrats not pushing this increase in the budget, we're now looking, at least I think, in the next week, we're going to see another massive wave of, 5 to 7 million unemployment claims. Probably not 7, because I think the most we've seen so far is like 6. So it's probably going to be around 5, maybe 4 point something. It was like 5.2 recently. But with no more money left for the Paycheck Protection Program, again, because the Democrats didn't want to increase it, I think it's likely we will see a major increase in unemployment claims. When these people can't buy food, what do you think happens? The supply chain is disrupted because processing plants stop buying. So they're not buying from the farms aren't selling. The jobs start evaporating. They start firing workers. They can't just bring that back. The food banks run out of food. And then what do you think people do when they get hungry? Well, like we've seen in Sicily, and like we see now in South Africa and Lesotho and potentially other countries, well, people go and take the food. And there's little you can do to stop them. Now, of course, there are people with guns who will work to stop them. But look, enough people, and it doesn't matter how many cops or National Guard you have. If there's 5,000 people in front of a Walmart screaming and demanding food, I don't know what to tell you, man, because we've seen these lines. They're in the hundreds to thousands of people. Now, I don't know if things are getting better or worse. I don't want to make overly sensational content where it's like the end is nigh. So I've contemplated whether or not it would be right or wrong, to leave out certain things. But I'll put it this way. I have some other stories here I'm not going to get into because they sound more shocking and alarming. This is certainly worrying. But we're also seeing the number of cases go down. And the next segment I have for you is actually a study showing that the mortality rate is ridiculously low compared to what they projected. Internationally, we've seen from like 1.7 to like 3.4. And now it looks like, according to one study in the US, it's like 0.12. You know what that means? Comparable to the flu. I'll save that for the next segment. So stick around. The next segment is coming up in a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.